Hello and welcome to Unicorns in the Break Room, a weekly podcast about living your best life in corporate.
Here we guarantee that the coffee is always hot
The donuts are always fresh.
and absolutely no one is ever getting riffed.
Not on our watch. I'm Sarah Vella, leadership coach and CEO of Pinecone Coaching.
And I'm Amy Lewis, marketing director by day, mentor and confidant to the stars by night.
How's it going, Amy?
Sarah, your weather called and I'd like it to go back.
I know in our weekly stand-up section, I put in my notes about the weather, and then you texted me earlier and you were like, "It's snowing."
I'm happy to say I'm in the South. We're notorious for getting snow mixed with ice, and obviously ice and trees does not work out well. Catastrophe ensues. But this time they got it right. The forecasters knew. We used our one salt and ice truck in town and covered like every possible back road you possibly could. So I'm hopeful that people are paying attention. We've got our milk, bread, and eggs. But it's very cold. It has snowed consistently all day, and I'm gonna say we've got 3 or 4 inches now.
Nice. I mean, that's pretty.
Yes.
I woke up this morning, it was 5 degrees. And I'm just over it. I'm a little bit over it. Also, it snowed twice last week, and the first time it snowed, it got really wet, but it wasn't a lot, and then it froze. The guy who comes and plows my driveway did not come and plow that snow because I think he knew a bigger, heavier snow was coming 3 days later, and so he just elected to wait, which turned out to be. And then when he did come, which was around midnight, there were still a couple more inches left to go.
Gosh.
So by Monday morning, which is incidentally the day that the propane truck always comes, I had a layer of ice under 2 inches of snow on my back driveway, which is the driveway that the propane truck needs to come up to get to the propane tanks, which are behind the goat house.
This is over the river and through the goat house.
Right. And so I saw the tracks of the truck that tried to make it up the driveway and failed because he's got to back up this hill, basically. I couldn't get past the ice. So then I emailed the plow guy and said, "Could you come lay down some sand?" And he said he would. He didn't say when, because why tell me when? And then I called the propane company and said, "Listen, the sand is coming," and they were like, "Sorry, the driver's like gone, so you have to wait a week." And then the sand came, and basically what I'm trying to tell you, Amy, is the thermostat is now set to 62 because I need this propane to last.
Yes. Yeah.
So the space heaters are running, the layers are being worn, the thermostat is set down low, and we just got to make it. We just got to make it to next Monday, and everything is going to be fine.
Oh my gosh, that is. And meanwhile, I had a great work call with someone who, just chit-chatting about the weather, and she's in a sleeveless tank, and I'm like, yeah, it's snowing out here. She's in Australia. Anyway, one of the joys of global work, we actually had a good laugh about it, is these tools make us so connected, and we're so close by, and then you just have a little moment like that, and it's morning for her, I'm closing, it's at the end of my day, etc. And you just have that. But it was hilarious. I'm in, a heavy sweatshirt and she's coming in from an outdoor jog or something.
There's something so strange about the winter, the summer, like the season not lining up with the months in Australia.
Yes.
It just doesn't make sense to me that winter is not when Christmas is. Like those things should go together.
Mind blowing.
That's their summer break. Bizarre. Well, I don't know how to transition. I was going to say, like, speaking of, but I can't think of the speaking of. So we're just going to transition inelegantly to our topic today, Amy.
I've got it. When your world turns upside down.
This is why we pay you the big bucks. I should have just left it to you.
It's the stars that told me that one. It's my work with them.
So yes, that is the topic today. The topic is when your world is turned upside down at work. And, we We sort of hinted, I think, at this topic a couple of weeks ago because we got a great email from one of our listeners, Nick, who we've referenced before on the show. Nick over at Nerd Journey, who's put a lot of work together into supporting people who are looking for work. But I'm just going to, if it's okay, quote directly from his email just to set the table for us, and then we can dig into the topic itself. So the topic is essentially what to do if you are the one who gets left behind after a workforce reduction. And Nick wrote, in part, the email was longer than this. And actually, he talked about more than just workforce reduction. So he was also wondering about, what to do when your boss leaves voluntarily and what to do when all these other things happen. But for the purposes of this show, I think we'll just stick to how to kind of cope with the aftermath of a WFR. So quoting from him, what if you shared with your audience a little bit on how to process that situation, especially if they have never seen it happen? With that happening so much right now in tech, it might make for a well-timed discussion. There's the group not impacted by the layoff and those who were. I can tell you earlier in my career, I saw layoffs from time to time, and it was always sad, but it was never like what we are seeing in the last couple of years. With the rounds of layoffs that hit my employer over the last year after my company being acquired, it's been a definite shock to the system and a lot of change for people like me who survived. So that word survived, I think, is a real clue too. And we're going to talk about survivor guilt first, but I think we're just going to run down a few kind of things to keep in mind if you are going through this and you are the one left behind.
It's such a great point, and I'm so glad. Thank you. Shout out to Nick for bringing this up, because I remember I just remember it was a time way back in the Wayback Machine when we were all in the office, and I just remember the absolute quiet in the office. It was, everybody's on pins and needles. I was so young and ignorant, I didn't even kind of fully grasp, that this was a motion that happened. For me, it was in tech where I really remember it. And so I had, other industries I had worked in were sort of onesie, twosie, this concept of a WFR, RIF, all these words were foreign to my, I didn't have the language for it even. It just the quiet. I'm sure those listeners who have experienced it back in the day when we were in person that really can resonate. Like, it's just like something really tragic has happened. It's somber.
Yeah, and it's so, to your point about the language, like I remember, I came to work in a corporate office when I was already 40 years old. So I'd been working for my whole adult life, but never in that sort of an environment before. So I'd never experienced a layoff, a mass layoff, emotion, to your point.
Mm-hmm.
I'd never even heard anybody say riff or rift, and I didn't know what it meant, but people just kept saying, that person got riffed or they're riffed. And I remember even at the time being like, I don't know what that means, and I don't really want to ask right now.
Which I guess we should clarify, assuming we get some global listeners. So WFR, workforce reduction, and RIF, reduction in force.
Right.
So another way to acronymize, make an acronym from something to somehow soften it.
Mm-hmm.
When, people are getting laid off. And obviously it's very much in the US and a very public conversation now with what we see happening. So I think a lot more folks who maybe not in tech are going to become familiar with these words and these constructs.
And, I remember the first time going through that at Dell and just, starting to put together the kind of bigger context of why these things happen, how the decision gets made, who, how people get chosen. And some of that is always going to be a little bit invisible to you, but really feeling kind of shocked and sort of sad about the fact that people that get affected and swept up in these things, maybe some are low performers, but for the most part, people that get affected and swept up in these things, it's not a reflection on their performance. It's a numbers game. They're selected for all kinds of reasons, and often it's done for kind of bigger picture corporate reasons that feel very inhumane to the people who are being affected by the motion. I just, it's just a shocking, strange, sad, horrible thing to have to go through. But it's a part of life. It's kind of like, I remember also the experience being sort of like, well, this is just a thing that comes around, like the flu
Like
every.
clockwork. I know.
Yeah.
It is like the flu. That's a great analogy. And kind of to that point, I actually think it's so important that we talk about the survivor's guilt. Like we think a lot, and if you haven't experienced a riff in your career, then good on you. I think that's a great thing. I have been on both sides of them, and the survivor's guilt is real. There is something to your point, Sarah. It's a way of doing business, but the ripple effect is large. So let's dig into what that's like to be in that quiet hallway, if you will, after.
Yeah, so the first sort of bullet under this section is, I'm just going to read it. Being spared in a layoff does not mean that you are better or more valuable or more deserving than those let go. And that's not to say that we think that if you got spared that you're on some kind of an ego trip, but often there can be this attempt to sort of understand it or make sense out of it or explain to yourself, why did I get to stay when those other people had to leave? And we're here to tell you, like, there's no real, like, good or solid reason.
No, it's sort of like one of the, why do good things happen to bad people kind of concepts as well. Like, we're not saying it's either or, but if you haven't had a break room conversation about why in the heck did Jane get cut when John hasn't done a day of work in his life, it is trying to make sense of it will only make you crazy. So I just love how you frame that. It doesn't mean it has nothing to do with value and worth. It really doesn't.
Right. And that's kind of good and bad news, I guess, because on the one hand, the good news is you don't have to feel, you don't have to be burdened by comparing yourself to other people, to the people who left or to the people who have stayed or any of that stuff. The best advice I ever got from my first boss at Dell after going through that first round of layoffs was he's just said, keep your head down and do your work and do it well and focus on just doing the next right thing. And people will notice that. Don't get caught up in the chaos. And we're going to get to that in a second. But I really took that to heart. And I share that with people anytime I've ever been through some kind of a workforce reduction. But to our earlier point, like companies make these decisions based on financials, based on role redundancies, based on restructuring, based on appeasing shareholders, based on all kinds of reasons that have nothing to do with you, especially personally. It's not a merit-based decision.
No, and I love this other point of guilt doesn't serve you or your former colleagues. Acknowledge your feelings, but don't let them derail you. I think that is spot on. And we'll get more into this as well, but in terms of just guilt, exactly. It's not a good situation. You can acknowledge that it is a somber and real moment on both sides, but you can't live inside that guilt or anger or those other emotions. You gotta kind of stay centered.
Yeah, generally speaking, that negativity, and we will talk about that, but I think it's okay to take a day or two to process. You
That's
are
right.
going to feel the feelings that you're going to feel. We're not saying to, don't feel guilty or don't be
No,
sad or don't be mad.
no.
Like you can be sad, mad, and feel you have nothing to be guilty about, I guess. But like if you're having the feeling, you're having the feeling. The feeling is the feeling. But learning to understand that this is a decision that's made at the institutional level and that it has nothing to do with you. And there's still work to be done. And you are still being paid by your employer to do that work. Whatever your feelings are about the situation, you can choose at some point or other to go somewhere where layoffs don't happen. But right now you are at work and you work for this employer and it is your job to show up and commit to your end of that bargain, that contract that you've made. So trying to put those feelings that you have aside and focus on the work that you're there to do, I think will help you also kind of move through this shift.
And that leads us into our next, which I in a time of uncertainty, I like to take an action. So this is stay connected with your laid off colleagues. And there's so many good ways to do this in the short term and in the modern times. Folks will share a LinkedIn. They will often share, maybe you've got a personal connection with them, so you're stayed connected that way. But one of the threads I've seen, at least in the tech world, is there are a lot of alumni groups. I'm a member of a couple of them on Facebook in particular for large tech companies that have had a series of these. And sometimes you're a first timer. Some people say, I'm a multi-time rebounder. I've gone in and out of said company. But it is a pretty remarkable way to watch people kind of connect, share stories, reminisce, grieve, get together, etc. So if you are, still there, it doesn't mean you can't be part of these alumni groups and offer kind of support and ear, really push out some great job postings when you see them, etc. So it's a great way to kind of be to grieve and still be helpful, taking that action and stay connected.
Yeah. The people that got laid off have experienced a trauma. And you might be feeling like you've experienced a trauma, and your trauma does not, it just doesn't measure up to their trauma. Sorry to tell you.
Yeah.
It's traumatic on both sides of the equation. But to remember that what's happened for those people is the entire rug has been pulled out from under them. And they need, having been laid off and also having been left behind, I think we've both experienced it. I can say that like the worst part for me after being laid off was feeling like I had suddenly become a pariah to some of the people that I worked with. Not all of them, but some of the people that I worked with, I suddenly just did not exist. And the story I tell myself about why that happened, and I could be wrong, was that the people who I felt maybe abandoned by felt a kind of guilt about it and didn't really know what to say or how to respond to me. And that sucked, frankly. So I really want you to think about who are the people who you were in regular contact with, because it is just a very shocking, strange thing to suddenly have your entire routine removed. And that includes especially the people that you're used to interacting with. Whether that was your boss, your peer, your subordinate, those people, they're missing you now. And to reach out to them directly. Another thing I see a lot on LinkedIn, that I'm not saying there's anything wrong with this, but it's just not enough, is the post. We all see this post. I know you've seen it, and it happens after a layoff. People from the company will put up a big long post that says, "I'm here to support you." The general, like, let me know how I can help, essentially, is the LinkedIn post. And that, what you're not doing is reaching out. I mean, what you might be doing is reaching out, but what that doesn't do is really solve the problem for the person who is struggling and in need of your help. And maybe I'm not articulating this really well, but I'm also thinking about like when someone experiences a death, for example, and this is similar to that. You could send them an email and say, "Let me know how I can help you," or you can bring them a casserole. And what you should do is bring them a casserole, because they don't often know what they need or what they want or how you can help them. It's emotional energy for them to tell you what they need or what they want or how you can help them. But if you just deliver something to them in the form of help or an invitation to have coffee or an introduction to a recruiter that that is really great active support for the person who's been laid off. I got there.
And I will say, I think there's also, depending on personality and just timing, there is a role to be played for those kind of first responder actions. And there's a role there for someone who's in the trenches longer term. To your point, that sense of being a pariah can happen. People can. It's why we're so firmly underlining this is a no fault moment, right? These are things where no fault. It is a company decision, and they are hard and difficult decisions. And honestly, many times, many of us have felt they weren't the right decisions at the macro or micro level. That said, I love your point, Sarah. Be specific, and it doesn't have to be immediate. That's great too, but you can be part of a longer wave of action. You can check in a month. You can be specific. You can offer that support. And then you could be part of a next wave. This is an ongoing thing to show that this is not a moment in time. We're connected. It's something I try to practice in my own, regardless of the circumstances that have brought us together or apart. I have several groups of folks. We've talked about this as good practice through our job hunting series of make sure you're keeping your contacts list up to date. So all those good things you were doing if you were job hunting, do them as a good steward if you were the survivor of a workforce reduction. Maintain community. I think what we're saying is that's the central theme. Maintain that community no matter what.
Yeah. And I love what you said about the next wave, because I think the next wave and then the wave after that those are the waves that really matter, because that first wave, for the most part, people do get plenty of attention and support, either through a corporate sponsored placement program or friends and family helping out, or, and they have a little bit of a cushion typically, so they're not in panic mode maybe right away, but it's the 2 to 3 to 4 to 6 to 8 months after the fact. And we're seeing this more and more too, Amy, which is like, it's a tough market right now. So there are people out there who've been job hunting for a year or more. Those people, that is a real struggle and really, really hard. And to go and reach out to somebody who's in that position, I think would really mean a lot to them.
That's right. That's right. And it reinforces you're not a leper. You're not outside the community. You're still here. I'm still here.
Yeah. Yeah. So we do want to focus on what to do at work and not just how to support people who have left.
Yeah. More actions. Yeah. Yeah. More action to be taken, right? So after the dust is cleared, the hallways are sort of making noise again. And how do you navigate this change? Anybody could have been impacted. It often means new leadership, broader reorg. Let's not lie about it. You've probably been to one, had to write the copy for one, or been in some ways related to having to have that day after call, conversation, town hall. It's a lot. It's a lot of change. It's a lot of uncertainty. Whatever you thought was true is now not, and you've got this new normal. I think it's really important to acknowledge that this happened and to not cover it up with fancy words or reduce the feelings that come with it. And this is the balancing act. I will also charge you got to feel what you feel, like you said, Sarah. Accept that change is hard and constant, but simultaneously, you neither have to be Pollyanna-ish and overly bright and cheerful and swallowing the company pill that this is so great and the brave new world is ahead of us. But you also, I would counsel you not to live inside of that moment. I have observed too often folks who say, oh, this is, they go full Eeyore, right? These are the end times. This is so terrible. Yes, I survived, but it's so terrible. That doesn't make the people who feel better who got riffed. That doesn't help the colleagues around you. And it doesn't help you. And I know this is really difficult stuff, but I am telling you, keep it in the middle of the road. If you make the layoff your whole personality, it's not going to help you do the work.
Yeah. And I want to back up for just a second, because there's one thing that you said that just triggered another point for me, which is when you reach out to those people that have been laid off, don't engage in a huge gossip session with them about what's going on at work. They don't bring them back to the office with you to bitch about what's happening. They're not there anymore. There's nothing they can do about it, and it's frankly demoralizing for them to hear about it. So focus on them and on things outside of the job, please. Okay, back to the reality.
Yeah. My complicated advice: don't be Pollyanna and don't be Eeyore. Find your in between.
Well, listen, I want to get back to you have a job and you're being paid. And it is not your job to armchair quarterback what's going on in the decisions that are being made at, multiple clicks above you. It's, in fact, kind of not your business. What your business is your business. Focus on your job and the people around you that are still there, and on understanding what the objectives are of your team, your manager, your skip level, and be an example to the people around you of forward motion. And again, not toxic positivity, but focusing on what is it that we can do and that we can accomplish here together, rather than just devolving into endless bitching sessions about how things are not going the way that you want them to, or this reorg is a bad idea, or that C-suite executive made a bad decision. It's not going to help, and it could really, really hurt you in terms of your reputation and in terms of just the negative effects on the mood of yourself and the people around you.
And I want to take a thread you pulled through on your other comment. Simultaneously, don't bring folks who've been laid off back into the mix. Do not gossip, particularly, and this goes double for anybody who's listening who is in a people management position. This is not the time nor place. You got HR training if you knew you were having folks impacted on your team. This is not, do not speculate, do not gossip, do not high five. We're so glad, whomever got yeeted. Right? This is, don't do it. Don't do it as an IC. Don't do it as a leader. That does not help.
Yes.
This is, change management is one of the hardest things. And I do agree. It is, I always think about the queen is dead, long live the king. It is a changing of the guard. It is a shift. No one's asking you to do back handsprings about it. Or if they are, then maybe that's not the right place for either one of us. However, that neutral posture, that this is what we have, these are the cards in front of me right now, how will I play this hand, is my strong recommendation. That's what you can control.
Yep. Yep. And that's all you ever really could control.
Yeah.
Like sometimes I think it's
Yep.
a good wake-up call. Like going through something like this is a little reminder that, the organization around you and the decisions that are made in terms of the way that it's structured are way beyond your control. And you might get the illusion of, I don't want to say stability, but the illusion of constancy or something can set in. And something like this can really shake that up for you and be a good reminder of, first of all, no one is safe, not to make you paranoid, but like to our point about this whole podcast, you should always be keeping that CV polished and keeping your network up to date and exploring opportunities out there because you never know. And also, like, you don't get to decide unless you're the CEO how things are going to go. So a little bit of what we're saying is kind of like, suck it up.
And kind of to segue into the next bit, I really like this section too about, this really resonated with me. Set boundaries. You can't work your way out of job insecurity. So it really echoes what you were saying there, Sarah. Raise your hand if you're type A and think if you just work harder, better, faster, it will all be better. No. When layoffs happen, it is really tempting to overcompensate, to somehow take that magical pill that will immunize you against this future action. These things are so wildly unpredictable in my experience.
Mm-hmm.
Longer hours, extra tasks, trying to prove you're worthy. There are a lot of people who were let go, who absolutely were rock star performers and sat in the wrong division, had a different job title than was required, for whatever reason appeared on a spreadsheet. There are so many reasons. It is, don't kill yourself in this effort to prove you're worthy.
Right.
It really isn't about that.
And don't compensate for, don't don't pick up the slack that was left behind by this corporate decision to lay people off around you by taking on all of the roles and responsibilities of the people that were let go. If the decision was made to lay those people off, then the decision was made to deprioritize the work that they were doing.
That's right. And
you need to be clear about what the new priorities are for you and for the team and focus on those and not give in to the temptation to, quote unquote, do more with less or whatever that ends up getting thrown around as a phrase sometimes in the wake of these things.
Yep. And I love this point too. Burnout won't help you or your employer. It is really back to our centering point that there is work to be done, even at Nozzle Corp, our very questionable company that Sarah and I like to blame everything on. Good old Nozzle Corp. Burnout doesn't help the bottom line. It is a case of put your own oxygen mask on, and with those good deep breaths, you're going to make better rational choices. Have those conversations directly. If you're in IC, be confident to say, those are positive, I think non-toxic things. You can say, what are the priorities? I want to make sure I understand the priorities with this change that we've got. I'm assuming we'll be focusing less on Acme project and doing more work on Beta project, if I heard that correctly in the town hall, right? That's an engaged employee. Talk the language of business, learn what the priorities are, make sure you're clear on how you align to them. And that's literally all you can control.
Yep. And if you're a leader, just to follow up on that, so that was great advice for an IC. If you're a leader, but you're not at a super senior level, not only can you, but you should call a team meeting after all the other meetings have been held. There will be higher level, distribution of this communication around what's going on and why. But have a meeting outside of your standard team meeting with your team to give them an opportunity to talk about how they're feeling, allow for that space to listen to what they're feeling and thinking and worrying about, present to them also this positive, forward moving, priority focused attitude, right? So whatever your personal feelings are. You need to give them something to hang on to and something to believe in moving forward. It's your job as their leader to help move them through this, not push them through it, not force them through it, not bully them through it, but lead them through what's going on and clarify for them what the priorities are and what your expectations are, to give them some idea of, what, take some of that pressure off, in other words, around what the expectations are going to be. You might not have all the answers, and that's also fine. You probably won't, because often these things come and blindside even leaders in terms of, especially if you're kind of in a middle manager role. But get your team together and let them know that you're there for them and that you will continue to connect with them and you'll help lead them through this in a way that is sane and reasonable for everybody involved. That will give them a lot of confidence in you and take a lot of the fear and anxiety away as they navigate these next few weeks, because it can be really disorienting for the people under you.
Your role, you are a people leader, and your role is to think about talent retention in this moment. And I really appreciate the framework of one of my current company leans on a model coach care is the sort of 3-part philosophy. And I think I really appreciate that. And I like to share and talk about that, because BU leader or IC, I think these are good attributes, but particularly as a leader, you have to remind yourself your job here is to prevent talent bleed at this point, because it's an uncertain time. It can open up that space. So think about model coach care. Just like Sarah said, you model the behavior by behaving like the steady leader you would want to see. Coach people in those group settings and as individuals to have that space. And care, really let yourself be that safe space for people to express how they're feeling, their fears, their concerns, their anger. And you have to give it time and space, and then say, okay, that's where we are, and how can I help you transform and move forward? And again, I like your point. This is about a team meeting to let people experience this kind of in a group. And then you have that private session in your one-on-ones. You make sure that you've got space for it to be able to get people to really get a good listen on for how people are taking this news. It is hard.
Yeah. And I think I emphasize the meeting just because I think sometimes leaders think, well, the communication has happened. Like, it's been delivered.
That's right.
The information has been shared. There's nothing more for me to do. And your job in this moment isn't to deliver information. It's to create a safe space and a container for people so that they know that you've got their backs. And they really need to hear that from you as soon as humanly possible, even if you don't feel like you know what to say. It's not about you having something to say. It's about you creating a space for listening and to create some, emotional safety for your team.
Yeah, spot on. And to that point, finding our last point in this of how do you find that gratitude, again, as a leader, as a contributor, without succumbing to toxic positivity? Because we've also seen those folks, and they, it is almost as bad as the Eeyore is the person who is like intensely positive about this is going to be the move that makes it all right.
Right.
It's
now we can really fly.
Cut the loss, it can be really hard. And I know we've got some special circumstances that we can talk about. Like, what if it was the boss that recruited you into the company? I've had that experience. To have your leader who's workforce reduced right out of there, that is something, right? And maybe it's a project that you came to work on. There's a lot of circumstances. I think you have to really acknowledge, this has happened and this has changed, and figure out what your new normal looks like. What are those new relationships? Hopefully you've been building a broad network while you were there. If not, this is our action call for you, right? If you are in a seemingly stable environment, you always should be networking, connecting, etc. Because don't assume things will stay the way they are. It's time to stop and do an assessment. We've given you several kind of tips and tricks through our podcast. Go back and listen if you're a first-time listener on this episode. Pull out some of those tricks and again, take that action to sort of center on your own growth path. Are you having the right mentors and relationships? Are you clear on the work you're doing and how it relates to these bigger goals? Is it the work you want to do? It can be a moment of reassessment. And again, maybe this is the moment where you go, I need to start a longer term job search. I see I see the direction this company is going and I see what is valued to them. And I came on for the Acme project, not the beta project. And I really feel strongly about Acme work. So I'm gonna take this moment and be grateful that I was one of the survivors, but not getting riffed doesn't mean you have to stay.
Right. Or an alternative idea there, Amy, is often immediately following some kind of a workforce reduction, there will be some sort of restructuring or reorganization.
Yep, that's
and
true.
This is an opportunity for you to speak up about some role or innovation or team or opportunity that you're interested in that might, opportunities open up in these moments.
That's right. That's right.
And you should speak up for yourself and advocate for yourself if that's something that you're interested in, because this is a great time to sort of step in and say, I've always really wanted to lead this project, or I'm really interested in working with that team over there. And people, leaders are more open to those kinds of changes in these times because they're starting to they're building out PowerPoints and trying to figure out who's going to go on what team. So speak up.
I think that's such a great point. And again, if you're doing your homework and you're clear on what you like to do and what your goals are, then you're ready to see this. Listen closely to those town halls. Read the information that comes out. Know what the goals are. And I love your point there, Sarah. Say, I'm really passionate about this particular goal. I can imagine taking on this and this would help me approach this differently. It's different than what we're saying. It's not fun to receive 3 people's jobs. That's not what we're saying. We're saying, look at the spectrum of opportunity. And if you see something there for yourself that's different than what you're doing now, be prepared, be bold, bring your receipts, know what the company is looking for, and show how you can deliver against that. It's a little bit of taking our job hunting advice and applying it kind of in this moment. It's a little bit of a wild card situation, and you could land yourself with some different work that you think is important.
Right. Cool. Awesome. So final thoughts on this topic before we move to action items. We want to reiterate that being left behind after a layoff can be a total roller coaster. So it's completely normal and okay to feel relieved even, or to feel guilty, to feel sad, to feel mad, to feel confused, all of that stuff at the same time. So it's just important to acknowledge those feelings, stay connected to the people who matter to you, including the people that have left, but find a way to move forward with positivity and energy towards the work that you're actually doing instead of getting stuck behind in the story that you're telling yourself about what should or should not have happened, because it's out of your control. So really focus on your future and on moving forward together with the people who are there on your team. And just know that you're not alone if you're going through this right now. We know it's hitting all kinds of sectors, including the federal government over the last few weeks. So if you're going through it, we just want to say, whether you're affected as a person who's been laid off or if you've been left behind, we know what that's like, and we're here to support you as a little unicorn podcast.
We do. And I think it's so crucial to say, I would encourage anybody who is survived the riff, if you will, don't take an immediate action yet. Don't be reactionary. Sort of that would be my last wrap up thought too. Mm-hmm. I think what we're saying is be mindful. Again, it's your choice to stay. If you stay, be all in. If you decide that this means that the company's moving in a direction you're not comfortable with, you don't have to quit in an act of protest or loyalty. You can be mindful and you can sit with those thoughts. It doesn't mean you drag and are negative at work. It means you go, yep, I'm pretty sure this means I'd like to go a different direction. Or, yep, I can see how I can make a difference here. I think I'm going to stay and really give it its all. Give yourself a couple of weeks. Take these actions to kind of soothe yourself, go through your feelings, be supportive. And then know that the next choice you get to make is yours. And there isn't a wrong choice, right? But it's very cataclysmic in the moment. Let the space open up a little bit and then figure out what your next move is.
Well said. Nicely put, Amy.
Thank you. I've done this a time or two, Sarah.
Yeah,
I've done this a time
unfortunately.
Or two.
Look,
Yeah.
It sucks. I mean, we're not going to sugarcoat it. It's really tough on both sides, but it's also part of life, especially part of corporate life in America. There's things that can come out of it that can be surprisingly rewarding if you're willing to be open to those possibilities. So, Amy, your action item for our listeners.
Especially because our topic is what to do if you get left behind, I'm going to encourage everybody to put your own oxygen mask on first. And that can look different for different folks. What's one action that you can do to take care of yourself, to get that solace, that peace, that thoughtful distance? For some people, it's writing. For some people, you might need to take a saved up PTO day. Again, resist the urge to be always on and killing yourself at work. Use your good judgment, but think about the ways that you can discreetly, not signaling any sort of wild intentions one way or the other, but practice some self-care. Take that longer weekend, use a massage credit, whatever it's going to take to get you some peace and distance. Change is hard, even when it's good change. A buddy of mine who is a change management expert really taught me that. Even if the change cuts in your favor, so to speak, change is hard. So take care of yourself in that moment. Take one action to make sure that you're able to make the best decisions you can.
Love that. And I want to encourage people to reach out to someone if it isn't, if you haven't been through a layoff recently at your job, surely you know somebody in your network who has. But what I want you to do is look for someone for whom this happened 6 to 12 months ago. So someone who's in that second or third wave of dealing with this, and especially someone who hasn't yet found a new position, and reach out to that person with a specific invitation. So this is a very detailed action item.
I love this one. I love this, Sarah. Yeah.
So I don't want you to say, checking in, how you doing? I want you to say, let's meet for coffee. Are you free Friday? I don't want you to say, thinking of you. I want you to say, hey, I know a recruiter over at Nozzle Corp who is looking specifically for a product manager. Like, would you be interested in me connecting you up, right? So find a valuable way that you can help them specifically and offer that specific help, or bring them a casserole. That is also an option. Like I've got extra jambalaya. Can I swing by your house? These are all ways that you can support somebody who's experienced a layoff and take the emotional burden off of them to tell you how they need help, which is part of what makes it really hard to suffer a loss. By the way, this really helps for someone who's experienced an actual loss as well. So if you know somebody who's grieving a loss and they also are in that second or third wave, because the same thing happens when you lose a loved one, is that you get a lot of attention for the first couple of months and then it falls off a cliff. Even if you don't know anyone who's been through a layoff, maybe you know somebody who's lost a family member or a friend or even a pet, and that is a great person to reach out to as well.
If we all did this, boy, wouldn't we be a better place? You've inspired me. I'm definitely going to look through my network and see who I can help. Thank you, Sarah.
You bet. I love that. I have a friend. We sort of support each other because we both got laid off from different companies, but within a couple of months of each other. I'm fine now. Like, I'm very happy in what I'm doing, but we still do really specific things for each other every once in a while. She just sent me a book that I really appreciated, and that's a great example of, like, we live in different states, but she sent something specifically to me that she thought would be helpful for me. So do that. Be like Carlene. All right. It's inbox time.
So reminding everybody that you can email us at unicornsinthebreakroom@gmail.com. Tell us how you cope with mass layoffs. Tell us your stories. We have our own, and we can certainly anonymize and support. So we're here to listen. And Sarah, I believe we've got an email from a listener.
Yes, we got an email in our inbox. Very exciting. So someone sent us a note. I'm just going to read it. I've been an avid listener since episode 1, and your content has helped me navigate my recent promotion to team lead. So congratulations.
Congratulations.
I'd love to hear you tackle imposter syndrome, especially how it shows up differently at each level of leadership. As someone who often feels like they lucked into their role, I know I'm not alone in these feelings. And it was signed Natasha. So love that topic. Amy and I are both people who've presented on and experienced imposter syndrome. So I think we have a lot to say on that topic as well. So we will definitely cover that in an upcoming episode. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, thank you, Natasha.
And keep those emails coming. So thank you for listening to Unicorns in the Break Room. Please tell your work besties, your friends, and even your frenemies about us.
And again, we want to hear from you. Let us know the topics you'd like us to cover in future episodes. Be like Natasha. And send us your corporate war stories and unicorn dreams to unicornsandthebreakroom@gmail.com.
You can also visit our website at unicornsinthebreakroom.com for show notes and other information.
And of course, follow us on Instagram at Unicorns in the Break Room.
I have some unicorn valentines that never got out, but I will.
It's never too late to send a unicorn valentine, Sarah. Be the second wave of valentines. Yeah.
I'm going to be the second wave of unicorn valentines. Most importantly, please, please, please subscribe to the show. Like, actually go to your podcast player and hit the subscription button so it arrives in your podcast player every week. That really helps us get discovered. And what helps us even more, well, that helps us more. But what also helps us is if you would just go over to Apple Podcasts on your lunch break or, right now and leave us a review. Those reviews make a huge difference. And we know you're out there. We know you're listening. We know you like the show. So just do us this little favor, please. That is how you could specifically help us. We don't need casseroles.
Though I do enjoy a casserole. I'll take a casserole recipe and a review. If you want to leave us a review and a link to a recipe, accept it.
Yes. Listen, if you email us any recipes, I will cook them and review them on the show. So how about we do that too?
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. And again, we know you're out there. I just wanted to do a shout. Thank you for all the engagement we're getting on LinkedIn. It makes a lot of sense. These are career things that we're talking about. We're hearing a lot of great feedback and insights on LinkedIn. So thanks. Sarah and I are both posting over there on our personal pages. I don't even want to think about what it would look like to have a Unicorns in the Break Room showcase page on LinkedIn.
I'm not managing a Unicorns in the Break Room LinkedIn page, at least not yet. I think we need to get to the level of social media manager before I'm willing to do that, Amy. But yeah, actually an invitation also to listeners who want to connect with us on LinkedIn. I think we'd love to make that personal connection. So if you want to follow us on LinkedIn, well, speaking just for myself, I can't speak for Amy, but I would love to connect.
You can speak for me. You can speak for me in this way. Absolutely. We have been having some great conversations with each other's networks, even because our networks overlap, but they're not fully overlapped. So really appreciate the conversations on that platform.
Yep. That's fun. All right, cool. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.